Hi, I flew in from New York, but I'm not from New York. I'm from the Philippines. And to all my colleagues from the Philippines here, hello. All right, so just a little bit of background. I've been researching and studying inclusive education for so long. My first research was in 2004. Therefore, I was reading back literature in the 1990s about inclusive education. So I'll breeze through this because you're probably eager to go to lunch as well. Um, we have a school, a small school in the Philippines. It's an inclusive school. Concurrently, I teach at the university, so I have colleagues here also from the university. I come with you with these children who have been with us. A little bit of their story. One of them has autism. He started with us at 5 years old. He was the classic autistic child who would run around, read very well, very good in math. He is now in senior high school doing a STEM program. We don't have a senior high school, we're only up to middle school. So one of them was diagnosed with a learning disability at a very early age, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And his mother was crying to me at that time because his reading therapist was telling the parents that your child will never be able to read again. And this is the classic case of a child, and I always tell my university students, if you really want to grow in the teaching profession, have an experience with this. The working memory wasn't working. So this is a classic case where you present a concept or a lesson, and after 2 days, he looks at it like he's never heard it before. So difficulty in learning, and he had difficulty in math, in reading, and his developmental pediatrician told me, just upload information there and it will pull together and believe. So all his grade school years, he had such difficulty. And one day, the summer before grade 6, the mom comes to me, was crying. She was always crying, but this time tears of joy because now his son wants to suddenly move from having difficulty in reading to reading novels, Percy Jackson books. So this boy now, this child, whose therapist told the parents that he will never be able to read again, is going to the university. And he's going to take up liberal arts education and hopefully take law because his parents are lawyers. One of them is a marginalized boy, a street child, who did not have formal schooling until he was 9 years old and he came to us. He didn't have any concept of letters and numbers. Cut the long story, he's already in an IB school because his parents travel a lot. So we worked with these children. One of them, when he was a baby, he had traumatic brain injury because the nanny didn't carry him well and he fell and hit his head. So he had also difficulty in learning. He's in a regular senior high school with a humanities track. He is having difficulty, University of Asia and the Pacific. He's having such difficulty, but he's really trying his very best. One of them is severely autistic, nonverbal. He will never be able to go to college. But he's with us, and later on I will introduce you to the program that we created for him. So I'll share with you a little bit about the evolution of the practice of inclusive education. And if you are into it, just so you know, I have learned through the years that there's no perfection in the implementation because we're dealing with human nature and children. You can only expect progress there. There's no right and wrong, but the efforts to try, because this is such a challenging endeavor, you're going to go to heaven maybe in the eyes of the parents and in the eyes of the community. The inclusive education movement started really with children with disabilities versus children without disabilities. And the big question was, at which point do they become us? You're dealing with a whole spectrum there of disabilities. Then they were segregated, then they mainstream, and the term inclusive did not really come in until the researchers and the practitioners refined the idea. So integrating them meant physical integration, pedagogic integration, and social integration. But if you are here in this stage where you have this in your programs, where the focus is locational. How many times a week is this child going to be able to join the general classroom? How much percent of it and what subject areas? Is it only going to be socialization or some aspects of extracurricular activities? Then that's a normal course or a normal path for developing your programs for inclusive education. Then there was this, so I was reading literature and it was so interesting. There were full debates, of course, against it because of the full inclusion movement where you have to accept them in general education classrooms. Whatever kind of disabilities, they have to be there because the spirit is there, that they are not supposed to be separated and they are more like us than different from us. But as practitioners, we find it, well, you know, on a practical basis, if you have an autistic nonverbal child, I don't know how that child will be able to cope with the expectations of your program 100%. So the idea of accessing it, having access to your curriculum came up. And so you have pull-out programs, you pull them out during certain subjects where they can focus on individualized learning, or you have push-in programs where they come from therapeutic interventions, for example, and join your mainstream classroom, or have a shadow teacher for those who have difficulty functioning, or remedial teaching outside the classes. So the idea of access, where the framework for the curriculum would be the general curriculum, but there must be some levels there, some aspects to the activities in the general curriculum that the child will be able to tackle. So when I speak about inclusive education in USA, in Europe, in Asia, it is always a difficult thing to face for educators. It's a difficult thing to face. It's a difficult thing to see head on as a school, because the challenge is you need to bring students together, those with learning problems, and I'm talking, you know, just with learning problems, and those without learning problems, without lowering your academic standards. And how do you teach the best at risk, teaching the best without neglecting the weaker ones? And how do you teach the weaker ones without lowering your academic standards? So it's been a debate in literature, and when I speak about this, educators acknowledge it, but I'm always pulled to the side after, yeah, you know, it's really a difficult problem for us, but it's hard to convince our administrators that we need to flex in some areas. So it's not really discussed openly, but right now, hopefully, you know, we're at the verge of really seeing this and really accepting this, that it is possible. So then the idea of inclusive education evolved to the idea of equity and access. Equity-based, multi-tiered approach, you can research it. It's a scientifically, empirically based approach on how to teach all kinds of children in your classroom in terms of abilities and disabilities. So to summarize all the literature, an inclusive education is a reform program. Everything that a school does in order to include those who are marginalized or those who will not otherwise succeed in a regular education program. It has to be deep-seated and a process of transformation. And us, in the field of education, transformation is always a word that we use, that we want to happen. But this is different level transformation. In order for it to work, it's not superficial transformation that's needed there. It welcomes diversity. This is, in the beginning of the research on inclusive education, the word diversity did not really materialize yet. They were looking at it from the pedagogical aspect, from the curricular aspect. But now diversity is there because you have different kinds of abilities in a elementary school and in a high school that will be seen as, they call it now neurodiversity, different ways of learning, different natures and approaches to learning. It values the human presence. people who are included, being, doing, and thinking, recognizing the personhood of this individual. No matter what the strengths, the disabilities are, there is that person there. And even in my work with very deep child with autism, you always see that there is a person there wanting to be included. It recognizes diversity. It wants to achieve equity. And if you're into it, you're doing inclusive education, removing all obstacles to the access to the general education curriculum, the life of the school, the physical facilities also. It's a radical reconstruction. When people write about this, I cannot emphasize enough how radical you need to look at and reconstruct your schools. So if you had one of those students who couldn't read and was told by the therapist that he will not be able to read going through grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he's probably going to be flunking or kicked out already from a regular school. There is a diverse need for the student population. All right, this is what the literature said. What did I learn from it? 14 years of the school being inclusive. When I started to do research on inclusive education, I told myself, I'm never going to do this. This is impossible. This is hard. But there was an opportunity to put up a school, and we took it. And there was no manual. There's still no manual for how to do this because it's person to person, individualized. So we worked, the children themselves taught us how to do this. My insights. If you want to be an inclusive school is not the regular school. It's not going to work. One of them will give. So this is where the deep reconstruction and transformation should happen. Of course, on a practical basis, your admissions program must decide that you're going to accept children with disabilities. That alone is a big chunk of decision-making that schools need to have. An inclusive school is an irregular school, and some theorists have already written about it. This is not your regular type of school. And there is no room for surface-level agreements because on a daily basis, you're going to be challenged. Why am I doing this? I used to think that, I'm going to close the school tomorrow at 10 in the evening. This is so hard. And then you come back and you see the children again and you're inspired to continue on. And I'm really, really happy to share with you that, it's not easy, but we've had major successes. So you deconstruct your school and reveal first what are your exclusionary practices. That's how you start being inclusive. To include does not necessarily mean to be inclusive. So that's just word of mouth for you. We're going to include, but really the work happens when they are there in your schools. It impacts educational leadership, your educational framework, family and community engagement, and education policies and practice. Of all the four, the key to a very successful inclusive school, and I've reflected on this a lot, is your own leadership, your own attitude, the way you model behavior, those words that you speak, even your thoughts that's there, the body language that you have, because your teachers, the implementers of your vision, will see that. And they take a cue, they take their cue from you. So that's a lot of challenge, but at the same time, inspiration. That's the first training for the teachers. Okay, there are limits to it. I'd like to say that it will work 100%. That sure, we're going to do this. We've reconstructed the school and we've decided to do this. But it always boils down to our schools and classrooms as the microcosm of society. Your rights end where the rights of the others begin. So in this particular case, children who have very violent behaviors because their specialized needs haven't been addressed and they can hurt others and themselves, then we don't accept. This is not the environment. They need extra help. Okay, so a lot of the literature, unfortunately, does not write about the other children, those who do not have special needs. But it also affects them. And I always have to constantly remember, I am there for all the children, not just for those with special needs. So when there's violence in behavior, as a matter, of course, because of their disability or neurological issues, then we draw the line. There's really controlled transfer of knowledge. When you accept them, you actually decide what they're going to learn because they don't know the spectrum of the knowledge and skills that you can give to them through the individualized education program. And they, in effect, have limited access to information and knowledge. Whether there's disabilities or not, you decide what are the content areas and what topics to teach, right? There are some schools in my country where Harry Potter books were banned. Okay, so now there are some schools where you're not supposed to say the word gay. So, in effect, school leaders really have the decision to what the breadth and depth of the goods that you distribute, which are knowledge and skills for the students. This one is so powerful. They want to be included all the time. That is so powerful. And even when you think they're not aware of it, they are. So they want to be part of the group. They always do. This is pedagogical paralysis. This is the start of the research now where, yes, you accept, but the teachers focus on the difference. So let's not look at that. Let's look at differences that are pedagogically relevant to the planning of our lessons. And if you get the chance to look at the multi-tiered approach, then that's going to help you not be paralyzed or not focus on the difference. So then, our students, we don't have a college or university that ends there. Where do they go? Some of them are going to be able to do it in the university, but for those with severe neurological problems like autism, nonverbal autism, I would sit with parents and tell them, we need to plan because they're not going to be able to be accepted in college or in higher education. Where do they go? Are higher education institutions ready, even for the higher functioning ones, or even for those who are slow learners? Is there anyone here from a higher education university? I know my colleagues are from the Philippines. So I teach also in graduate school, and I know that there's really a limit there for our admissions for children with cognitive severe disabilities. So because in our school they are not able to go to college, the kids who envision this are the kids, the peers who didn't have special needs. They were worried about their classmates who wouldn't be able to go to a college or a university, so they approached us and they said, why don't we create a business for them? So we created a cloud kitchen business because we were in the pandemic, we couldn't be physically there, where it will be an apprenticeship program for all high school students, but at the same time, it should offer certificate programs for people with disabilities, and hopefully we will be able to hire people with disabilities whose job opportunities outside are very limited. So that's kind of the vision for this. But this idea came from the peers who are not disabled. They were immersed in the concept of there are peers, my peers who probably will not be able to go anywhere. So they pitched the idea to us, and of course we're going to take it, right? So I'm going to rush through this. The future, what do I think is going to happen in the future? So if you study and if you want to implement it, there are already answers on how you can flex your classrooms and how you can accommodate them and how you can give them access. But looking beyond and in the context of the times, what are the possibilities that are there for us, or the challenges that are there for us, or the questions that are there for us? Okay, so we know that inclusion is authentic integration of identities, the person, race, gender, nature, ways of learning, strengths, weaknesses. You all have that in your classrooms. And when I was working on this, I was thinking of the higher education classrooms. But identities also come with different worldviews. So worldviews are visions of life. We all have it. We all come from somewhere. Beliefs and values that are inherent to us. Maybe we were brought up in a certain way by our culture, by our ethnicity, by our group. We all bring that when we are with a group of international colleagues or classmates. The question may be someday, should all worldviews be included? In higher education institutions where you don't want your classrooms to be echo chambers, you want them to be able to engage. What kinds of worldviews do you think? Just as when we thought, what kinds of disabilities are we going to be able to accept? What kinds of worldviews would be okay? And what does acknowledgement of that mean? Does that mean that you're going to just say, okay, that's your view, and I respect that your claims are valid for you, and my claims are valid for mine? Does it stay there? Is truth a matter of personal definition? This is my truth. This is what I learned growing up. Does epistemology of truth matter, therefore? The science are you going to do away with science just because you are recognizing the identity of that individual? So I'm going to rush because can we ever resolve disagreements about truth and reality, especially in the age of fake news? Does truth vary, therefore, just because you're including people? And as schools, how lenient are you going to get? Are we just going to allow all worldviews to be discussed? The goal of inclusive education, I think, is not agreement or resolution, but understanding and respect, so that I can still offer respect to those who are radically different from my views. And there's an opportunity for enhanced dialogue, broadened discussions, developing critical thinking skills in the students to discern fact from fiction, from popular to truth. And not just there, and you know that, you develop critical thinking skills, but corollary to that, critical reflection skills, so that if I am passionate about my truth, but if someone points it out to me that there are loopholes in my truth, there are blind spots and blank spots, then I should be able to accept that, and that should be progress. Finally, on a final note, I am a volunteer of the Youth for a Better World, and there's a booth outside, and we immerse our students here because it's a global opportunity. It's a model UN group that brings students to New York, the United Nations General Assembly Hall, and to Rome conferences. It has started to be in person. That's why I came from New York at the UNFAO. So it's a year-long program, and I immerse the students here because they really see, debate, and take and listen to ideas that are sometimes so contrary to theirs. So if you have any questions, I am there at the booth outside. You will find me if you have any questions about this presentation.
Amazing, Hope. Give her a round of applause, everybody. Amazing, amazing. Great, from the Leyson School. You're going to be here for 3 days at the table outside, right? I know people want to talk to you. How are they going to connect with you? On LinkedIn?
I'm just there sitting down, so you can come by and email me, or anyway,
talk to her. Take a picture.
I will leave you with this. Nothing is worth doing that's difficult, can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope. Think about the context of the times. And nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith.
Faith.
Nothing we do, however, virtues can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we must be saved by love.
Love.
Thank you.
Yes, Hope. Go, girl. Look, her name's even in that quote. I love it. Thank you.